It's a great personal pleasure to welcome our next guest. 15 years ago, I was a member of John Major's number 10 policy unit as the 1997 election loomed. While the bullets flew and the shells landed, I remember staying safely in touch from the bunker at number 10 with the special advisor who was out minding the Prime Minister on the front line. 4 years later, that special advisor went into Parliament and never looked back. In 2005, he became Shadow Chancellor. In 2010, he became the youngest Chancellor of the Exchequer since Randolph Churchill in 1886. We welcome George Osborne.
Well, Simon, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And Simon, thank you for that introduction. Actually, Randolph Churchill was an absolutely disastrous Chancellor of the Exchequer. But he did produce Winston Churchill, so we're very grateful for that. But it's a pleasure to come and speak here. It's great to be here with you. It's good to be here with Boris and Anna, two great figures in the London economy. And it's also good to be back here at the Albert Hall, where I remember coming to speak at this very event, the IoD annual conference, in the middle of the last general election campaign and all the drama that involved. And I remember speaking on this stage, and I remember the palpable feeling out there in the audience, a feeling of fear, a fear that Britain was on the brink of a full-scale economic and fiscal crisis. And markets at the time were questioning our country's ability to pay its way. And people were wondering around the world whether, as a nation, we had the resilience and the resolve to turn it around. And it turns out that we did, as a nation, have that resilience and resolve. We confronted the crisis head-on, took the difficult decisions needed to restore credibility. And today, I detect here a different mood, one of cautious optimism, but with an emphasis on cautious as well as optimism. And your campaigns, I think, as the IoD, have helped shape that mood, and I congratulate you for the way that you are engaging in this debate about where the economy goes for now. Because the British economy is looking better. The economy is growing in all sectors. British businesses have now created 1.4 million new jobs. And almost 5 years to the day after the near collapse of the British banking system, we have started to sell off our shares in the banks and to get taxpayers' money back. Britain is turning a corner, but we have a long way to go. At home, our economy is still in the early stages of recovery. Unemployment and our deficit are both still too high. Abroad, while the extreme risks in the euro area have been reduced, they do remain. And emerging market economies have slowed as capital flows to recovering advanced economies have come back. And so my message to you today is that it would be a mistake to think we can ease up in repairing our economy and fixing what went wrong. Quite the opposite. And I am more determined than ever to see through our economic plan. The plan consists of an activist monetary policy that supports demand, supported by credible public finances that ensure stability. All of this giving us space to improve Britain's competitiveness through lasting structural reform. And let me take all three parts in this speech today. First, monetary policy. The government has deliberately pursued a strategy of tight fiscal policy and activist monetary policy. That is the best way to support a private sector-led recovery. Take the Funding for Lending scheme, which we launched with the Bank of England last year. The evidence is now unequivocal that the scheme has had a dramatic impact on financial conditions. And the latest data shows gross lending to small businesses is up 14% in the year to July. In the budget this year, I updated the remit of the Monetary Policy Committee and asked them independently to look at the use of forward guidance. And in response, the Bank of England adopted explicit guidance that means interest rates won't go up until jobs, income and spending are recovering at a sustainable pace. This will give greater confidence to businesses such as yours to grow and invest. And my argument to you today is that none of these monetary interventions would have been possible if the government hadn't taken tough action to get the deficit down. The credibility of our economic plan has helped keep market interest rates low, providing the Bank of England with the space it needed to act. So that's why our comprehensive deficit reduction plan is the second part of the broader economic plan. Now, when I became Chancellor, just a few days after this conference 3.5 years ago, our deficit was forecast to be the highest of any major economy in the entire world. We were borrowing £1 for every 4 that we spent as a nation. And since then, we have reduced our structural deficit more than any other major advanced economy. The budget deficit is down by a third, but at over 7%, it remains far too high. And we want to keep on reducing the deficit, and the plans we've set out to do that are primarily through reducing public spending. Because I have always been clear that Britain's problem has been that its government spends too much, not that it taxes too little. And that means tough choices to reduce departmental spending, cut welfare bills. That job is far from finished. And that's why we're about to introduce a new cap on overall welfare spending, why earlier this year we successfully concluded another round of savings in the cost of government. Further such tough decisions remain ahead. And now, as you know, there has been, over the last few years, intense pressure to change course, intense pressure to spend and borrow even more, to try and take the easy way out. But you, in the Institute of Directors, you didn't buckle in pushing for us to stick with doing the right thing. You held your nerve, so did we, and together we're staying the course, and I want to thank you for the consistent support that you provided to the government. Plan B would have been a disaster then, and it remains a disaster now. For yes, some are still calling for more borrowing and more spending. But British business understands that Britain needs to live within our means, and you have my unwavering commitment to see our plan through. We need to live within our means, but we also need to be able to earn our way in the world. And that's the third part of the economic plan. Because the fact is that over the last decade, our economy has lost ground compared to many of our competitors. Our tax system became uncompetitive, businesses were increasingly constrained by red tape, and our infrastructure was aging. And over the past 3 years, this government has pursued far-reaching structural reform, because that's the only lasting way to raise our nation's living standards and succeed in the global race. At successive budgets, I have cut corporation tax. It has already fallen from 28% to 23%, and it will reach a historically low rate of 20% by 2015. And the result is that in surveys, we now are said to have the most competitive business tax system in the world. And the international firms that were once queuing up to leave this country are coming back. From April next year, the new employment allowance will come in, and that will take £2,000 off the employer national insurance bill of every company. And that means a third of all companies will be taken out of this tax altogether. Our patent box is attracting knowledge industries from around the world, and we're providing tax breaks for our research and creative endeavors too. And we've reduced the costs of doing business, with the longest duty-frees in fuel duty for over 20 years, which, by the way, was the #1 demand, not just of motorists, but of small businesses across this country too. But perhaps more than any of these reforms to business tax, my decision to abolish the 50p rate faced the fiercest opposition. It wasn't a popular move, but I did it because I don't want Britain to send a message to the world that we are closed to business and closed to enterprise. I want the opposite to be true. And let me say something briefly about tax avoidance. Under the last government, I think we had the worst of both worlds. We had high taxes that weren't paid. I want competitive taxes that are paid. And ultimately, a system where some businesses can avoid paying tax creates an unlevel playing field, which is bad for business as well as for the taxpayers. What I'm also clear about is the limits of acting alone in this world. Clamp down too hard in one country, and it's all too easy for those companies to move elsewhere. And that's why Britain will continue to make the case for new international tax rules that ensure everyone pays their fair share, but without pricing ourselves out of the global market, and we're making huge progress in that agenda at forums like the G20. Our reforms to the tax system are just one part of our plan to free the entrepreneurial forces in our society. We're fighting the forces of stagnation on every front. Where successive governments have tried and failed, we are pressing ahead with the privatization of Royal Mail. It won't be easy, there'll be fierce opposition, but we're determined to see it through because, as the IoD have said, it's good for customers, for businesses, and for employees. We're supporting the largest program of investment in our railways since Victorian times, spending more on new roads than in a generation. And yes, that includes high speed too. It would have been so easy to scrap that project when we came into government, with a massive deficit to cut. After all, the benefits will not be realized in this Parliament or even the next. But I don't want to make the same mistake that, frankly, governments of all colours have made over the past 50 years of failing to make the big investments in infrastructure that are needed for our country to compete. Our rail system is already full, and we know it will get worse without HS2. Last week, a report by KPMG showed HS2 could provide a boost to the economy of £15 billion a year. And funding for HS2 isn't instead of other transport investment, it's on top. Projects like these take decades to build. You can't go back and fix the mistakes you made if you don't invest when you wished you had. And I passionately believe that if we don't invest now, we will regret it. It's the same reason this government is backing shale, despite, again, significant opposition. It's never easy getting public support for a new source of energy. The public need to be convinced it can be done in a way that is safe, avoids environmental damage, and that they will see the benefits. But there are few things more fundamental to business than secure and affordable energy supply. And shale, alongside oil and gas, nuclear and renewables, has the potential to be a vital part of our energy future. And with your support, I am absolutely determined that it will be. I'm not prepared to saddle this country with energy bills far higher than our competitors, because that means higher costs for families, lost jobs, and less investment. That cannot be Britain's future. Reforming the European Union is another hugely controversial and complex task, but it's the right thing to do for business and jobs. And I absolutely agree with you, Simon, when you say today that Europe has lost its way, it's in need of fundamental reform. That is the view of British business. It's the view of the British people. And that's what we intend to deliver with a plan for renegotiation and a referendum. And I thank you, British business, for standing, in your words, foursquare behind the Prime Minister in his bid to renegotiate the terms of UK membership. For while Britain is restoring its competitiveness, and Europe must, other countries are not standing still. We are in a global race. And let me end by setting out a single challenge to you that I think that could transform Britain's fortunes. China. China is a massive opportunity for UK business. 10 years ago, Chinese GDP was a little less than the UK's. By 2020, it will be 5 times as big. Let's not see that as a threat to Britain. Let's see it as a huge opportunity. China's middle class is on course to be over 3 times the size of Western Europe's by 2030. And as China gets richer, they will want more of what the UK does best, more of what you do best. Our high-skilled, high-value knowledge economy, our financial services, our healthcare, luxury and creative industries. Since coming into government, we've pursued a deliberate strategy to help British businesses take advantage of the opportunities that China presents. The latest data released just this Monday shows that it has made a difference. Chinese investment to the UK is up 95% since 2011, to the 4th in the world. Goods exports to China are up too. They've doubled since 2009, and they're growing faster than France and Germany for the 3rd year running. Now, there are some fantastic British success stories out there. Unilever have just launched their 3rd manufacturing base in China last week. Penguin have just launched the new Ladybird brand in China. Jaguar Land Rover are exporting more to China than to any other country in the world. But the fact is, we're starting from a very low base. British small businesses are less likely to export than their European competitors, and the German goods exports to China are 5 times ours. Now, in just a few weeks' time, I'm visiting China for the Economy and Financial Dialogue, talking to my counterpart, the Vice Premier there, and to Chinese investors about how we can increase trade between our countries. I want you to know that this government will do everything it can to help you and support you, from promoting free trade, focusing our diplomatic services on emerging markets, providing support to businesses through UKTI, doing everything we can to help you export to China and these other exciting emerging markets. So whether it's keeping interest rates low, repairing our banks, dealing with the deficit, or the lasting structural reforms to make Britain more competitive, this government is backing British business. And as we move from rescue to recovery, the siren voices who want quick fixes are getting louder. The same people who said we should abandon our plan now say that because things are looking up, we can let up. Well, your voice, the voice of business, needs to be heard in the battle. I need British businesses, you here in this room, to stand with me and say we cannot let up. If we want a better future for Britain and better living standards for our people, then we've got to go on taking the tough choices to invest and grow to make our economy competitive. And with your help, we will do just that. Thank you very much.
George, thank you very much. We haven't got long, but let me ask a couple of questions. You've said you won't use the phrase green shoots until they're at least 5 foot tall. How high are they at the moment?
Well, look, I'm choosing my language carefully, and I'm talking about Britain turning a corner, but that we've got a long way to go. And I think that's where most businesses are at the moment. I think clearly the economic data has been a lot better in the last few months, and that's true of surveys as well as GDP and employment data. But I think a lot of businesses out there want to know that the recovery is going to be sustained. And my message to you today is we're going to go on taking the decisions that will enable it to be sustained. And that will give you the confidence to make the investment decisions, employ people and the like, that will make it a lasting recovery.
There are nearly 3,000 small and medium-sized businesses here. Many of them complain about the burden of European regulation. What are the sort of examples of areas where David Cameron can bring powers back that will help them?
Well, we haven't set that out yet. We haven't set out the shopping list, if you like, of things that we want to renegotiate. And indeed, we're in the process at the moment of talking to you, talking to British business about what are the things that the European Union does that make it more difficult for you to grow and expand and take people on and compete and export to China and so on. So we're in the initial stages of listening to you, and this is a great opportunity for our country to get a better deal for Europe, but it's also a great opportunity for Europe, because the challenge we face is a challenge that all European countries face, some more acutely than we do. And I think the business voice in this is going to be very important. I very much welcome what you have said today, Simon, about this, because I think those who say we can't change our relationship with Europe at all often say that, well, businesses will be nervous if we try that. But when I talk to many businesses like the ones that are represented here, actually it's European regulation that is often the most frustrating and the one that's proving the biggest obstacle to competition. So I think actually the business community backs what we're seeking to do here, of a reformed relationship for Europe for Britain in a more competitive Europe.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the supposed housing bubble that's in the press today. You've fixed a lot on the demand side in terms of helping people get access to finance for housing. We've talked a lot about the supply side, and you've had a lot of planning reforms that are meant to help build more houses. Where's the balance, and how do you feel it's going?
Well, we do need more housing in this country because there are many people who have a very legitimate aspiration to own their own home. And not only are there more people in the country, there are more families in the country for all sorts of social reasons. So there's a perfectly legitimate aspiration people have to own their own home. We want to help them do that. I think that's something that in a fair society we should promote. We do need more housing. We've made controversial changes to our planning laws, but the result is that planning applications are up and house building is up. That's all important. When it comes to house prices and the like, look, I have created a system which didn't exist before, where the Bank of England now has a responsibility to look at risks as they emerge in the economy, like asset price bubbles, and we have created that system in part because of what happened 5 years ago. But if you read what the Governor of the Bank of England said in his first big speech, he says, look, we are alert to those risks, and so they should be, because that's what I've asked them to be. But if you look at the actual data on housing at the moment, for example, transactions are 2/3 what they were, mortgage approvals are half what they were. And of course, outside London and the middle of London where we are today, even on the latest data this week, the house prices have barely grown. So, I would say, yes, alert to the risks, but let's not pretend there's a housing boom. And let's go on trying to fix specific problems in our financial system, like the lack of availability of high loan-to-value mortgages, which are not weapons of financial destruction, but actually tools that help many families get on the housing ladder.
Chancellor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.